Yay, we're recording. Full. So welcome to the Indy Xamarin Meetup. We meet up generally on the fourth Wednesday of every single month. We're based out of Indiana, but we can actually let everything happen now. It's the world's the limit. The world is our playground. So happy to have everyone here, and I hope everyone's staying safe. These are strange times, but let's throw some Xamarin into the mix, and maybe we all have extra time to play around with some of the stuff we talk about today. I'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsors, Sandy Solutions. Usually they would pay for the pizza, but this time the first 10 people that joined are going to get a Grubhub or equivalent gift card. So, usually they pay for pizza, but in this case, they're just going to pay for Grubhub, and then you can run with that. Yay. Also, Launch Fishers, which is usually where we have this meeting, when you're allowed to not have to be socially distanced. They're a co-working space out of Fishers, Indiana. Very cool place. Mfractor, I don't know who knows much about Mfractor on this call. If you're a Xamarin developer, my guess is you know about it. It's kind of like ReSharper for Xamarin. Very cool. It was only available on the Mac for a while, and they just recently released the Windows version. And if you already have the Mac license, you get the Windows license with it. So it'll automatically build all your image resources for you. It'll automatically take care of font importing, which of course with Xamarin Forms 4.5, a lot of that's just taken care of. There's a lot of stuff that's just easy to do quietly. My dog wants my attention. And then of course Rev Debug, which is very cool. It'll actually record your entire debugging session and let you go just slide through it and watch the variable states and everything through every line of execution of your application. And the cool thing about that is that you can see where all the exceptions occurred and see the stack traces and so forth all at the end. It's very cool. It's very powerful. So Sandy, like I said, is giving us these awesome gift cards for the first 10 folks. And I thought I'd let Greg from Sandy talk a bit about what they do. They're our primary sponsor, and then we'll get started. Greg?
Awesome. Thanks, Auri. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're Sandy Solutions, and the main thing that we do here in town is staffing all across Indiana. So that's the main thing we do. We also have a managed services side of our business that we work with. So we still have jobs available. We are still working with a lot of clients here in central Indiana and all across Indiana. So that's the first thing. So if you want to shoot me your resume, I'm going to put my email in the chat so you are able to connect with me. Also, in regards to the Grubhub gift cards, if you are one of the first 10 people, which right now everybody is, either put your email in the chat, or I'm going to put my email in the chat as well, so you can just send me an email if you want to keep your email address confidential. I understand that. So right now, Mark, Bob, Andrew, Carr, Todd, Dave, John, Bonky, Adam, and Alexander. Those are the 10 people that will get those $10 Grubhub or equivalent gift cards, and we'll probably get those sent out first thing tomorrow morning. So please put in your email on the chat, or just email it to me, and I'll put my email here and there. But I appreciate everybody joining in this afternoon. I hope everybody's staying safe as much as they can and being as socially distant as they can. But I appreciate Auri doing this, and we're excited to have you guys here, and I will leave it at that.
Yay.
And Auri,
you're welcome, John. And hey, Carr. Oh, great. So I hope everyone gets to enjoy those. Okay, cool. I get to dismiss stuff. All right, so I'm going to switch the view here to my regular stuff. Well, first I'll go through some of these. I already went through the our sponsors. When it comes to jobs, if there's anyone on the call that's offering jobs, go ahead and post that in the chat so that, if you're looking for Xamarin developers, you might find an option here. And if you're looking for a job, please go ahead and put that in the chat. And then anyone who might have jobs for you could reach out. Yay. So what you might want to do, I'm trying to think of how to, I'm wondering if I can remove the captions when I encode this. So I'll take a look at that stuff and see what I can do. Great. All right. And then afterwards, if anybody wants to, and this won't be recorded, of course, we could do a social. So if anybody wants to stay on and talk Xamarin, yay. And Xamarin may even be better with beer and bourbon, up to you. So FYI, usually when we meet in person, we usually go out afterwards. But if anybody wants to do a virtual social, sounds like fun. Okay, I'm going to switch to the other PowerPoint. Okay. Now, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm just going to share my entire screen at this point. My machine always runs slow when I'm sharing the screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? I'll take a look at the chat and see if no one can see it. Oop. Okay, people can see the screen. Great. All right. So a little bit about me. My name's Auri Rahimzadeh. I've been working with Xamarin since the early days. So back when you really had to pay for it, and I'm not talking about, like the little dollar amounts, like $25 per platform per month, but back when it cost a couple grand. And then it transitioned out of that, and we finally eventually got Xamarin Forms. This talk is not specific to Xamarin Forms, so the Xamarin Essentials that we're going to be talking about, that doesn't require Xamarin Forms for everything you want to do. But I'm going to focus on Xamarin Forms because it's a very good cross-platform solution. All right. So a little bit more about me. You can reach me over at auri@auri.net. You can hit me up on Twitter. My dog definitely wants my attention right now. And I'm one of those Xamarin certified mobile developers. So I went through the whole certification process, and it was pretty crazy, but it was worth it. So it was a lot of fun. And hold on one moment. There we go. All right. So before we get started, just a few notes on decorum here. You can ask a question anytime you like. That's great. Feel free to unmute and ask, just because I'm not going to be able to see the chat the whole time that I'm doing this. But I'm here to answer your questions. And Greg, I don't know if you see something in chat, if you want to bring it up. That might work out.
I'll keep my eye on it.
Cool, thank you. And then, so feel free to just simply ask. And like I said, a recording will be made available, and we'll post it on the Meetup site. So, we've been doing Xamarin development. I mean, I don't know how many people here are Xamarin developers, but when you're building a mobile application, there's a lot of common things you may want to do. One of them is providing maps. So showing a map inside of your application, providing directions, opening a map when someone taps something, tracking location, knowing when the location has changed and what the current location is, knowing if you even have a location permission, using device sensors. So if you're working with a watch, what sensors does it have available on it? Do you have a barometer, or do you only have a gyroscope? Do you have a GPS capability, which is a sensor of sorts? So lots of different sensors you may have, and these days, gosh, phones have so many of them. You may want to provide certain capabilities based on which ones are available. So how do you do that? How do you go ahead and do that? How do you get the version information of your application? So when you're building your about screen and you want to show, I am version 1.2 Android build 17. How do you get that? How do you get that information? Do you hard code it in your application? Do you write a platform specific implementation? What do you do? What about battery level? So maybe you have an application that uploads video, or even a game. Knowing battery level and whether it changes, and possibly letting your user know, hey, your battery's getting low. So I'm going to turn some features off. Kind of like when you're using your Windows laptop and it gets to 10% battery and it stops doing certain things, like it lowers the screen brightness, it may stop syncing. There's a lot of different things that change. So, or that you can change based on that. And gosh, it's good to know about battery level, because if you're cognizant of it, that's a better user experience. And you can make sure that certain things don't fail. So if you have long running tasks, and let's say the battery is at 15%, and you're going to use the network, well, you should probably let them know, hey, it looks like you're trying to upload a 2 gigabyte file. Your battery is really low. This may not work out. So would you like to try again later? Or please plug in your device in order to continue doing stuff. And that leads into, well, what about internet connectivity? If I want to upload a file, or I want to access an API, how do I know I'm connected? How do I know that I'm connected to the internet? So I can't see anyone raise their hand, of course, but how many of you have built a mobile app that relies on internet connectivity, and it connects to Wi-Fi at Starbucks, but they haven't logged in yet? So you have internet access, but all your API calls fail because they're all hitting the gateway that hasn't authenticated. How do you solve that problem? And there's a lot of ways that you could do this, right? And I call it the old way of doing things, which is where you write the implementation per platform. So before I dive into the next slide on this, I'm not a big fan of reading slides. The way we used to do it in the early days of Xamarin was, okay, I need to go write an Android version of this and an iOS version of this, or whatever the platforms I was going to support. So if I was writing only an Android app, I'd only write the Android stuff. And then iOS, I'd only write the iOS stuff. And a good example of this, way back when, this is, I don't know, 4-ish years ago, 5-ish years ago, I wrote some software called Crime Watch. And Greg, are you letting people in?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Just because I can't see the screen.
We got you.
Cool, thank you. So I wrote this application called Crime Watch, which ended up getting acquired. And when I first wrote it, in order to do geolocation, to figure out where the citizen was, because Crime Watch was all about hey, you can report non-emergency incidents to law enforcement. And it had a mobile component and uh, a web component. So the website ran into police officer vehicles where they could see all the incidents coming through. And the goal was that any citizen should be able to submit incidents. And within a few seconds, the officer should be able to see that incident has been reported. Cool thing about it, you didn't have to go through email addresses or various third-party services, etc. Within seconds, it was in front of an officer. And one of the things that it had to do was say, hey, where are they reporting this from? And then also give them the ability to say what where the incident occurred. And both of those required me to figure out their geolocation. So 5 years ago, Xamarin Forms had just come out. This is Xamarin Forms 1.0. So if anyone remembers Xamarin Forms 1.0, you probably remember how crazy it was. Like, it's really cool, but it's buggy. Yeah, and a lot of stuff doesn't exist yet that's cross-platform. It's really, how'd they do this in Java? How'd they do this in, back then Objective-C and some Swift? And then you kind of tried converting that to, your Xamarin Android or Xamarin iOS stuff. So for Android, I needed to use Android's geolocation provider, wire up all the event management, and I wrote an iGeolocation provider interface. Like a good Xamarin developer, I abstracted out the implementation, and I had my Android implementation of geocoding, which it worked, and then I had an iOS geolocation solution. Each one of them handled how it returned data differently. Each one of them required different permissions. Those permissions would change over time, and the application would break. And this is all in the first year that I was building this and that we had released it, because iOS, gosh, I don't even remember what version it was, but 8 and 9 and what have you came out, and they would break things in the name of privacy. lots of crazy stuff. So the problem though is that I had one implementation per platform, and I had to actively maintain it. So as the OS version changed, I had to maintain my implementations. And even crazier was there's people with different different OS versions across their devices. We didn't have the quite stable versions of Android and iOS that we have now. We had, like Android 7 and 8 were still things, and people had, Android 5 devices 5 years ago. I mean, it's been a while. I mean, just subtract 5 from what we're at now, and you're at Android 5, 6, 7. And a new version of iOS seems to come out every single year. So you were around iOS 8 back then. So if you do mobile development, there's a lot of change happening there, and that's expensive to maintain. Even if it was pro bono, which originally the Crime Watch app was. So that was a lot of work. So that was the old way of doing things. And then as Xamarin Forms got better and more prevalent, I think a lot of people started moving to that. Xamarin Android, really cool. You can use oh my gosh, MVVM. I'm blanking on the name. MVVM Lite. And the various MVVM platforms like Prism and so forth. People would use that on Xamarin Android and Xamarin iOS. But Xamarin Forms has kind of been, I feel, supplanting those to a great extent, just because it's actively maintained by Microsoft. And you get a lot of benefit when you got a multi-billion-dollar company. They're almost $1 trillion company right now. They ebb and flow. Behind the product that you're using, always a good thing. So the support for these packages really started growing, especially as NuGet became more of a thing. Visual Studio 2017 and above, NuGet became really the way of doing things. 2015, so, and anything under that, it was just a lost cause. So over time, instead of doing the implementation per platform by porting code, you would try finding a NuGet package that did what you wanted to do. And I imagine a number of people on this call know of James Montemagno and all the stuff that he's done, all that great stuff, all the great plugins that he created for Xamarin. He's at Microsoft now. So you can probably guess where a lot of that knowledge and capability went. So if you couldn't find a NuGet package, your only option really was to go write your platform-specific implementation. And these were for common things: location, opening up a URL, dialing the phone, checking the battery level, checking for connectivity. My gosh, they're just things that seem so simple that you use in almost every application. Like any app that has an API, I can't imagine that you don't check for, and maybe you don't, that you don't check for connectivity before you make an API call, just to help things go right. Hey, you're not connected, please connect, and then try your call again later, right? Your API call. And for example, airplane mode necessitates that sort of thing. So if you found a NuGet package, great, and you just hoped that it would be maintained over time. And if it wasn't maintained over time, then it would break and you'd have to go write, you'd either have to find another NuGet package or write the platform-specific implementation yourself. And that can be a lot of work. If anyone here has done that, it's a lot of work. And anytime it changes, it's more work. And you have to support multiple versions of the OS that your application is available on. It's a lot. It's just a lot of less maintainable code and a lot of overhead. And what that turns into is fear of every OS release. I know every time I'd hear of Apple coming out with an OS version, and Android coming out with something new, I'm like, man, this is gonna break my stuff. I'm gonna have to go install a beta version of Xamarin Forms to see if any of that breaks, and then I'm gonna have to make sure that I go get the beta, at least emulator images, and make sure that all my code still works, because the OS just simply breaks things. Anyone who's dealt with permissions in Android that was stuck with the what was that, right around Android 8, 9, 10 is when they switched to a user grant permission model rather than an all up, it's in the store, these are the permissions that are going to be requested model. That broke a lot of apps, and it was really it was a pain in the butt, especially when the app permission stuff got separated out, meaning that a user could grant your application some permissions, but then revoke them later. When that got built in, when Android basically copied iOS. That doesn't mean I'm a big iOS fan, just saying that was a good feature, and it was a bummer when they, I'm glad that they took it. At the same time, it caused a lot of headache if you're a mobile developer. So the issue here really is it's different implementations per platform, it's less maintainable code, and it's more code maintenance, i.e. more work. So Xamarin Essentials is coming to our rescue here. So Xamarin Essentials, in a nutshell, is a fairly lightweight package that includes almost every single common mobile function that you may want to do. So I'll get into that in a few moments, but let's go over the benefits of this. So like I was saying before, you had so many different implementations and so many different NuGet packages, it would be unruly to support all of that. This is the majority of what you're going to need in a typical application in a single package, a single NuGet package. Add it, and it effectively configures itself. I'll get into some of the details of what isn't taken care of for you, but we'll definitely be going over code tonight. So we're not just going to stare at my screen with PowerPoint on it. If you take a look, I've got a number of apps that I'm going to show you so that you can see how I've used it in my own applications, and also just walk you through the sample application that they even have. So Xamarin Essentials is actively maintained by Microsoft. So this may be the most important thing. There's a team of developers behind this, and it's kept current. So it's not, and so as the new versions of operating systems come out, Microsoft is actively fixing issues. And even better, and I left that off of this list, which I shouldn't have. So hopefully if Matt and James are watching, I'm sorry I didn't put this in here, but I'm going to bring it up. It's open sourced. So if you want to go see the code, or you want to do a pull request against it, like fork it, add a capability, and maybe get it into Xamarin Essentials, that's something they're cool with, and they encourage it. That's something I love about the Xamarin community, is that team is so open to open source. And Microsoft doing the 180 on open source versus closed source has been wonderful. And I think they have the most open source projects in the world now. They've surpassed IBM and Google. That's saying a lot. And of course now they own GitHub, which they had to do because most of their code was in GitHub at the time. So anyway, it's actively maintained. So you can sleep well at night knowing that chances are, by the time that something's going to break, or it could break in an OS release, they've already addressed that incompatibility or change in Xamarin Essentials. And for the most part, because you have a single package that you're using, they can take care of making sure it's not a breaking change, because your calls can stay the same while they address different OS approaches behind the scene. And all you have to do is update your NuGet package. And I have found that to be the case in many, that's the way it was in many cases. Like, oh man, I wrote this app a year ago and this isn't working anymore. I update Xamarin Essentials and boom, it starts working. It's pretty neat stuff. For those of you that are big fans of James's plugins, he had I don't remember the names of them, but they handled everything from settings to, they all were called like cross something. So cross settings, cross geolocation, cross connectivity, all of those. Basically cross platform, insert capability you want here. A lot of that capability has been, if not all of it, is in Xamarin Essentials. Plus a ton more. Like I said, it's lightweight. It works with Xamarin Forms, of course. And like I said, I'm focusing on Xamarin Forms in this particular talk, but that doesn't mean you can't use this in iOS or Android, or even if you want, Tizen. And the neat thing is that because if you start targeting with Xamarin Forms, you can, or Xamarin Essentials, then if you started with a Xamarin iOS application, then you could go and build your Xamarin Android application and keep the calls effectively the same. That's great stuff. You don't have to write things different ways everywhere. There's a common namespace for most of your common tasks, so you know where everything is. It's very easy to explore. Their documentation is fantastic. Very happy about that. If anybody remembers the Xamarin of yesteryear, the documentation wasn't always great, but after Microsoft bought Xamarin, there was money behind making the documentation and the support and everything awesome. And they've really, they just, lots of kudos to them, because I find Xamarin to be a pleasure to use. It's almost a joy. And what all of this leads to is that when most of the common things you have to do, which we'll get into that in a moment, are done in a single, simple way, it's cleaner code. It's a simple, unified approach, and it's so much easier to maintain because of the reliability, the support, the breadth of capability it has and the platforms that it actively supports. It just makes your life easier as a developer. Just first thing you should install by default is Xamarin Essentials, and I think all the latest versions of the Xamarin templates install Xamarin Essentials by default. That's what I recall. You can call me out on that if I'm wrong, but I think that they changed it so that it's included, just so you could just get started right away. So before I get into getting started, does anyone have any questions thus far? And you can put that in chat, or you could just unmute yourself if you like.
Yeah, there weren't too many questions in the chat, but they did come up with a few more future topics. So.
Oh, yeah. If you have any conversation or any chat topics or, pardon me, presentation topics for our meetup, please put those in the chat. We're looking forward to that. We've got, gosh, we're full up for what the next 6 months, and I think we can definitely add more topics. So it's good to see a lot of people excited about this. Yeah, definitely good to chat with other Xamarin developers and those that are interested. So if you are interested in Xamarin, maybe you're not a Xamarin developer and you have a question about this, or you're curious about how to get started, feel free to ask, and I'll certainly help you. And after this presentation, I'll stay on. So if you have any questions or you want to dig deeper into code, I'm happy to do that. I may have a drink in my hand when I do it, but we'll still definitely be able to talk. So how easy is it to get started with Xamarin Essentials? Okay, well, it's really rough. Install the NuGet package. That's mostly it. It's one more step in Android. So I'll show you real quick where that is. There's a nice getting started guide that I'll paste into the chat for everyone. There we go. The getting started guide, insanely easy. Obviously, if you know Visual Studio, get Visual Studio. I mean, that's a given. Just add the NuGet package. Super simple. Add the reference, and then iOS and UWP, you don't really need to do all that much. See, no additional setup required. Android, you need to add a couple items. One, you need to call the init just to kick off Xamarin Essentials so it's ready. And the other one is to handle all of your permissions requests. Now, if you've been using other plugins before that handle permissions, they're probably already doing something like this. But if you're doing any of the stuff that Xamarin Essentials is already doing and you're trying to move over to Xamarin Essentials, which if it does everything you need, I would suggest doing that. That doesn't mean go break all your code, but if it already does everything, why not have it all in one single package? It just makes sense, I think. So you just have permissions management, and then that's it. That's all you got to do. That simple. They'll take care of all the permissions and everything you need from there. There's gotchas with permissions. These aren't related to Xamarin Essentials, but I like to talk about that anyway, because if you're new to mobile development, it's important to understand some of the gotchas around that. So you could use the Essentials capabilities, but if you don't have the permission, it's just not going to work. And that's not Xamarin Essentials' fault. So what can you do? I'm going to go ahead and share this this link with everyone. Oh, I thought I had. There we go.
Hey, Ari, somebody had a question.
Yeah, what's up?
They said, in Forms, do you need to add Essentials to each project? iOS,
Yes.
Android?
Yes.
Great. That's a question from Bob C.
Yay. Thanks, Bob. And hold on, I'm going to get a little water. I probably should have gotten some. All right, I'm back. So you can do a lot of stuff. And I put the link over in the chat. So some of the very cool items, and these are things that I tend to use in my apps. So that's why I'm calling them out, but we'll go over those. Number one, really, I feel is permission management. That's huge because on a mobile device, you live and die by your permissions. Anyone here that was an Android developer in the early days probably remembers forgetting to add the internet access permission. Remember the internet permission? And you would go and you try making an API call and your app would crash. It's because you didn't have access to the internet. Apple, that was just a given. That, you know, out of the box of their permissions, that at least that one was a given. But with Android, it wasn't. Let's say you write an application that uses the camera. You're writing a Snapchat clone, or you need to take photos. You know, you're doing a line of business application for tracking weeds. You know, and you know, you need the person spraying the yard to take photos of the weeds that are in the yard, so you can report back to your customer that these are the weeds that you found. Well, you need camera permissions to do that. If you don't have camera permissions, you can't access the camera. The gatekeeper is the operating system, and it's going to be iOS, it's going to be Android, and they all have that permission there. What about accessing storage? You want to save a file locally. How do you do it? How do you access the user's files? You can't just simply do it. It's not like in Windows where you write an application and you just kind of like a whole hog access to pretty much everything. Even not being an administrator on a Windows device, you know, you can generally use the camera. Yeah, unless you're using like UWP apps, right? Or pardon me, modern apps where permissions are a thing. But generally, you can do whatever you want. So on mobile, very different. Location services. If you need to be able to figure out where someone is or where they're going, how fast they're going, etc., you need location permissions, and those are granular. They may be only when using the app or at all times. And querying those across iOS and Android, it's not one-to-one on which permissions are available. So having Essentials kind of abstract a lot of that stuff to be simple to understand and maintain and query just saves you a ton of time. There's tons and tons and tons of time. Location and mapping, like I was talking about, that varies on iOS and Android. And location, like I already talked about, in use only when in the app or in the background allowed or not at all. But mapping itself is also very different. Ever since Apple switched from Google Maps to Apple Maps, the process of launching maps is different. So in the old days, you used to use a URL or URI, depending on how you want to say it, it's formatted in a special way, and you launched an activity in Android to do it, and you launched, basically used the launcher in both Android and iOS, and you passed it this URL, and it would open the appropriate map. But that format has changed over time. So you'd have to actively maintain that. Xamarin Essentials takes care of all that for you. You want to open up a map, it has a really cool mapping feature to take care of all that stuff. Authentication, which I haven't played with this much, but it's pretty neat. I've been looking into it a bit, where it can handle your OAuth responses and such, all through Xamarin Essentials. I'm trying to learn more about that, so it just sounds very cool. Sensors. So if you're gonna check to see, hey, you know, I want to support, I don't know, a barometer and temperature sensors and so forth. Like there's just certain things I want to offer inside my application that require sensors. I'm building a fitness tracking application, and I need to track your jog, your run, your biking, your workout of some sort. Well, depending on the sensors available in the device, I may not be able to get the current temperature outside. I might not be able to get your heart rate. I might not be able to get your current elevation. I might not be able to get a step count. All those things I could query and then tell the customer these are the features I support, or update the UI accordingly. Preference management. Very cool stuff. So I could keep my preferences managed in a very common way. And by using Xamarin Essentials, I could actually keep my preference management in a shared library and just call my utility to go do all that work. And because it's Xamarin Essentials, it just takes care of it all. It's very nice. I actually use preference management to go between like in Android and iOS, they can sync their settings to the cloud. So the settings can follow my user as they change devices, which is pretty cool because it can be tied to the account. Sharing. So sharing in a common way. You don't have to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to share this? You just use sharing. And then, of course, secure storage. That's pretty neat. So a common way of storing encrypted data, so encrypting and decrypting it in a common way. So you don't have to worry about how Apple stores data securely for the most part versus how Android stores data securely. Pretty neat stuff. So let's look at the full list, because I can't go through all of it, right? But there's a lot. I'm just going to go through these. So here we've got accelerometer. We've got app information, app theming. So you can determine the theme. So if you wanted to choose whether you have dark mode or light mode or whatever the theme is on the device and modify your UI accordingly. And this would be an interesting thing to bind to the Visual State Manager. I don't know how many people have worked with the Visual State Manager. It's really neat. So you could change a whole bunch of settings based on the theme all at once. They were just talking about that in the Xamarin podcast. I think it's the second most recent one. Very cool stuff. The clipboard. So a common way to copy things over to the clipboard. And these aren't just simple capabilities. They also have color converters. So how do you convert your colors? Very, very neat stuff. Managing your connectivity, detecting when someone has shaken the device. So if you wanted to react, like maybe send feedback anytime someone shakes your application, you could do something with that. Get various information about the device, sending an email. Let's see, you're controlling the flashlight, pretty cool. All the geo stuff, launching any sort of URI, ensuring that you run stuff on the main thread. This is a big one for iOS developers. I don't know how many people have had to deal with like begin invoke on main thread. This lets you do this in a just a more standardized way. Pretty neat stuff. Some of these are just simply self-explanatory. Determining your orientation. Dialing the phone, that is different per platform. Like I said, managing your preferences. You can create an SMS for sending. For those of you on iOS, you can't receive SMSs in your app. That's not a feature of iOS. But Android you can, but that's not built in here, at least as far as I know. I've written a few apps that read the text that came in, and that's a really cool feature. But that's an Android thing because you can intercept that event.
Hey, Auri, question.
Yeah.
They said thoughts on how much longer until this all rolls into Forms itself. There's already some overlap, I believe.
That's a great question. I don't know. And my thought is that it'll stay separate for a while. That would be my guess. Because if you don't need it, why include it? I don't know if they would make it simply a default. Does that make sense? Because Xamarin, yeah, huh?
Yeah, he said it. Agreed.
Yeah.
He said tree shake it out.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt for it to be separate right now. You know, the differences is in the Xamarin.forms namespace. This is the way I see it anyway. Is it in the Xamarin.forms namespace or Xamarin.essentials namespace? And if it's not form specific, I don't know that it makes sense that it would stay in Xamarin Forms. So you don't have to have Xamarin Forms to use Xamarin Essentials. You could just do a Xamarin iOS app and MVVM Lite and get the Xamarin Essentials capabilities. So you wouldn't want to include Forms at that point. So I think the more I think about it, the more I think it would stay separate.
And then there's one other question.
No.
Alexander asked, Xamarin Essentials does not allow receiving SMS messages?
Right, because you can't do that cross-platform.
Okay.
So in iOS, in Android, you can be a broadcast receiver. That's the term. And you can receive a broadcast from the OS that an SMS has been received. You can actually intercept it and drop it if you make yourself the priority. I've done this before. iOS doesn't have that facility. It doesn't. That's the Messages is a first-party app, and you can't override first-party apps in iOS. Any other questions?
That's it. That's all I see for right now.
Okay. This is cool. This is the one I really want to play with. This web authenticator. Oh, you can make the phone vibrate. It's kind of cool. So see this? There's making it easier for your users to sign in to Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple accounts. I haven't played with it a ton, and I think it hands a bunch of the work off to a web backend. Like you can even use, I think, like an Azure function to do it. But the cool thing is that you could do all this stuff simply by joining the two together, and they walk you through the whole thing. I have not played with this, but man, I want to. So I'll post that in the chat for those that want to check it out. We're not going to go over that. That would probably be a whole separate conversation. So let me we'll go through a couple things. So getting back to my slides, I do want to quickly visit permissions. The permissions change over time. So you need to be cognizant of it. So if you're new to mobile development, be very aware of the permissions your application requires, and always check whether you have those permissions before you use that capability of the device, because that can turn into an application crash, and nobody wants that. By the way, these are the automated or the automatically suggested icons. So if you're wondering why these icons are there, it's just whatever Microsoft decided to give me. And different OSs have different assumed permissions, such as, like I said before, internet. Don't assume you have access to a particular permission. Be familiar with the OS that you've got, what its assumed permissions are, and check for permissions before you do that stuff. And keep in mind that users can revoke permissions. Don't think that because when you first launch your application that you walk the user through granting it permissions. They won't just go revoke those permissions later. Just gets back to rule one. Check for permissions before you take something that requires a permission. And then when it comes to submitting your application, and Android Google's getting a little more sensitive to this too, it seems. But Apple requires justification for certain permissions. So when you deploy your application to, say, test flight or use App Center to send it off to test flight, you might not be flagged. So you might not realize this is going to be a problem. But anything that requires access to personal data, such as location, you have to justify it. Anything that has access to photos, you have to justify it. So keep that in mind before you submit your application, that Apple can reject your app if they don't think it needs the permission that you're claiming you need. All right, so let's look through some code, right? We could talk about this all the time, but let's go take a look at some stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up, here's Xamarin Essentials right here, okay? And this is Xamarin Essentials samples, boop, right here. And then here's all the code for Xamarin Essentials. I just pulled this off Git, or probably off GitHub. I didn't have to use the NuGet package to do all this stuff. So I just pulled Xamarin Essentials off GitHub, and I now have access to all their code. Very cool stuff. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and run the Android app. So give me a moment. Let this run. So while this is coming up, does anyone have any questions?
There's none in the chat.
Okay, cool. We'll just wait for this to build. I know I've built it before, so it should come up relatively quickly. And while that comes up, I'm going to pull up some water. I probably should have brought this up earlier. I've never tried using my Hyper-V device with a screen share, so this should be interesting. For those that don't know, you can use Hyper-V. I don't know why Visual Studio keeps telling me I'm not using Hyper-V, because I know at least I was a couple months ago. Who knows if that changed somehow. Other deployment errors, that's okay. Just it's waiting for the emulator to come up. Wait for that to deploy. Let it. I guess technically I could have just launched the application. I'll probably kill the app once I try doing it, so give it a moment.
Hey, we got a question, Ari?
Yeah, what's up?
John says, I recall hearing James Montemagno say that he chose not to include interfaces for Xamarin Essentials. Do you know why he made that decision? It seems like it makes everything much harder to test.
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know why he decided to do that. I would ask James. I'm curious how he handles his tests. Let's see. Did they have? I thought I saw tests in there, but I have not reviewed their tests. That's a really good question. Let me see. I was thinking about that in the car today, actually.
Someone said it's Miguel's fault. Or maybe it's so you can make your own interfaces around what you need.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that today. Is it worth it? Because running the tests, they're very device centric. So I see the benefit of having the tests. But I also see where it wouldn't be worthwhile. You know, if it's such a big issue, like if you have to run tests around it, then I just, yeah, like James said, wrap it in an interface and inject it and test it. But that'd be an interesting thing to know. I'd be curious what his thoughts are around that. I don't know. Good question though. If you find out, send the link because it'd be cool to know.
Someone said there's a project on GitHub that auto generates interfaces for Essentials.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's not hard. If you have ReSharper, you can just extract an interface from anything. Just on the class, just I think it's Control-Shift-R, or is it Alt-Shift-R? Control-Shift-R, and then just say extract interface. Actually, I wonder if I can do that here. Well, let me. Where's it? Alt-Shift-R. Nope. Yeah, where do I? Oh, I don't see the extract option. Oh well. This isn't a presentation on ReSharper, so. All right, I'm just gonna launch this. All right, come on. Let's go over here. Launch Xamarin Essentials. May the demo gods be with me. Cool, it's gonna crash on me. I love it. All right, I'll just switch to my Mac. I don't know why it's acting up. I need to restart my machine anyway. Let's see. Samples iOS. So this is a startup project. Go connect to my Mac. Oh, things have really changed on my machine suddenly. There we go. Here we go. Make sure my Mac didn't fall asleep. All right. Do. There we go. Yep. Should have the lock there in a moment. Cool. Yay. Now iPhone SE should be an option. Cool. And that's the second generation iPhone SE. That's a cool looking device. Cool because it's only $399 versus $1,000. Connecting to the Mac. There we go. I don't know how many people have used the iOS simulator, but if you use it on a PC that has a touchscreen, then the simulator is also touchscreen. So if you didn't know that, it's a very cool thing. Waiting for everything to come up. There we go. Really? It's just going to crash on me? That's awesome. Huh. I know. I don't know why it worked last night. Ship it. Well, if the demo application won't run, then I'll move on. We'll see. I don't know. It was working last night, but things get funky when I'm sharing my screen. Let's see if I can. There we go. Come here. There we go. Yay. All right. I hope everyone can see this. So there's this really cool application that the Xamarin team has put together, and it basically shows everything going on with or that's available inside of Xamarin Essentials. So let's see. We can click battery, and you'll see charge level is negative 100% because this is the simulator. State unknown, power source unknown, and whether the energy saver's off. App info. Look at all the details you can get. The name of the app, its package name, the theme, the version and build. You can even open the settings on the phone. And Xamarin Essentials supports this sort of stuff. Very cool stuff. See, it's bringing up the settings for the application. I love it when it goes really slow. And let's take a look at how it did that, because why not, right? So let's look at app info, just in Solution Explorer. Let's go look at the app info is probably it, the view model for it. So here's the binding. So this is how you're getting the app package name, app info. Look how easy this is. It's just app info, dot package name, dot version string, dot build string, dot requested theme. And then, of course, there's a command for showing the settings UI, which all that does is hit appinfo.show settings UI. That's how easy it is to bring up the UI, the settings page for your app on the device. That's all you do. I love all the one-liners here. What they're doing behind the scenes in order to make this work. Just I'm so happy that they've done this for us. It's so cool. Playing around with the browser. What? There's color converters. So you can see like complementary colors. So calculating complementary colors, I don't know how many people know about complementary colors. Very cool. Playing around with conversions and so forth and saturation. Just very neat. Sending an email, finding out about the device. So check this out. What device am I on? Is it running a version of the OS that has features that I might not want to use? Or maybe I do want to use. I can do that. I can find out who made the device. This could be useful for tracking purposes. If you're trying to figure out if you're doing, let's say, a line of business application, and whenever there's a crash on your device, you could log these various details. Of course, if you use App Center, it pulls a lot of this stuff anyway. But this is a lot more information. Knowing the density of the screen, whether you're in portrait mode or not, which rotation you're in. So, are you rotated once left from portrait, 3 times left? So let's see. Let's take a look. We'll just we'll rotate it a couple times. And we'll look at device info. now you can see rotation 270. All very easy. All right, let's go ahead and rotate back. Accessing the file system, doing geocoding, geolocation, accessing the gyroscope, even keeping the screen on. So like if you're writing a game, you're doing something where you need to have the screen available, let's say a timer, you can keep the screen on. Launching maps with coordinates, neat stuff. Magnetometer, magnetometer. How do you say it? Magnetometer. There you go. I've never said that word in my life. Okay. Seeing the orientation of the device, requesting various permissions. What is going on here? I must have pressed something. I was bad. Okay. Okay. Stop moving. Okay. Permissions. Check this. You can see all the permissions that are available. Check and request them. So request the permission for vibrate. Hold on. This is a problem with using these things over a simulator, over a network connection. All right. Check. Do I have access? It's been granted. Because vibrate is, okay, so let's see. Do I have, oh, I have write access. Can I request it? I already have it, so there's no reason to. So you can see as you play with these, it tells you the info plist entries that you need. Also very useful. So this is a really neat application. Like if you've never played with this before, this is very cool. I'm curious what they do with their web authenticator. I actually haven't played with that. They see? I'm not going to go and try using my credentials on any of this stuff, but I'll see what it does. Oh, check this out. Yeah, sure. I'll allow it. Cool, huh? Oh, I wonder. I don't think I'm already signed in on this, so we'll see. Oh yeah, so I could go and try signing in. I'll hit done, which of course I didn't sign in, but we'll see what happens. See? I can see that it didn't work. That's pretty neat. I haven't played with that much. That is a really neat feature. So obviously lots of very cool things that you can do with this right out of the box. So any questions so far?
Nope, no other ones that I see in the chat.
Okay. So let me show you how I've used this in some of my own code. And then I'll open it up for just regular discussions and explain how you can get started and some additional resources on this. So one place was opening maps in a common way. That's been a pretty cool, that's a pretty common thing I have to do in an application. So let me see if I can find this. Where's my little application here? I don't usually have like 4 instances of Visual Studio running. So let's see. Is it the Mules page? Yeah, it's the Mules page. Let's see. I got this utility tier. So this is how you used to do it. See right here, you would just say device.openURI, and then you would pass it some detail. And on iOS, you do maps.apple.com, and it would intercept that. On Android, you need to send geo, latitude, longitude, and they'll launch the appropriate maps intent. But that's really not a great way of doing it, because this has changed over time. Like I've had to fix this a number of times. So this is one of those things where you do things old. And you'll see now, you even get an error that says, hey, you can see it says OpenURI is obsolete. Use launcher.openURI from Xamarin Essentials. So there's even a hint now that that's what you need to do instead. And that is actually async. So you get the benefit of having asynchronous calls. And if you know Android, iOS, and async and why this is important, Android especially, but iOS too, will punish you if you do too much work on the main thread. Android can just flat out exit just terminate your process. Apple, I think if you don't respond in a certain amount of time, it'll just kill your thread. I got to remember the details around it. But async and await can really help you with that by freeing the UI thread while your application does more work in the background. And it's effectively automatic. So if you're not using async and await, you should be. And so the way that I can modify this is all I would have to do is say, okay, async void. I could also make this a task. I mean, ideally, that's what you would do. And I would say launcher, come on. Yep. Open async. This is kind of cool. I haven't played with these others, but like try open async. So if it fails, you could do something about it. That's kind of nice. And then I could pass in the URI, but that's really not the right way to do it. Generally, what you do is you would use location. Boop, boop, boop. Where is it? Or is it maps? Is it maps? I'm trying to remember. Map.openAsync. And then you just pass it a location. You see all these options. So I could just say latitude, longitude. So I could say latitude, longitude. Wait. Oh, come on. This is a problem with screen sharing. It really slows down a few things. And the cool thing is now I can take all of this code and it's one line. See how cool that is? And then I can do the same thing here. I'd have to modify that. But that's how easy it is. And that's now going to work cross-platform. Now, another place where I've done this is calculating distance. So nope. So I used to have to calculate distance this way to figure out the distance in kilometers and then return it by miles. This is the old way of doing things. You had to find a way to do it. So instead, I could have just done this in Xamarin Essentials. I was looking this up today. I haven't done it yet, but I'm gonna. Look how easy this is. I can just say instead, just return calculate distance. I could pass it two locations. That's why it's null right now because I haven't finished porting it. And just say, oh yeah, hand me distance units in miles. That's how easy it is. Another place in my About screen, I wanted to show the runtime platform, so I could say this is the Android version 1.2 build 3. So if a customer had a question, they could very easily look at what the version is, and all I do is call device.runtime platform version tracking.current version. This is all in Xamarin Essentials. That easy. And another place where I've done this, I think I'm stressing my system. Go ahead and close that. Give some of my memory back. Another place is preferences. So when I've wanted to manage my preferences and basically store little bits of data, I just use the built-in preference stuff. And I just say, okay, I wrote my little utility for saving settings and getting settings and how I do my backups and so forth. But all you do is say preferences set. And I pass in a string that represents the name of the setting and the value that it needs to be. That's how easy it is to manage settings inside of the application. Insanely simple stuff. But this used to take you a long time to do. And it's all built into Xamarin Essentials. One-liners, the best thing in the world, one-liners. Or as Steve Jobs said, the best line of code is the one you never had to write in the first place. All right, I think I got all of that. Nope, it's getting on my case. Cool. All right, so getting back to the presentation. So those were some of the things I've done in my own applications. As much as possible, I now tend to start with Xamarin Essentials for all the work that I need to do. But it really just gets you going. And now, especially with like the authentication being built in, wow, it just makes a huge difference. Absolutely huge difference. So, any questions so far?
None in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. So, where do we go from here? One, go take a look at the Xamarin Essentials GitHub. I didn't put this in here, but you should really look at the Xamarin Essentials documentation. I've put that in the chat, but you can also just search for Xamarin Essentials. The GitHub, hey, go take a look at it. It'll show you all the code, how they did it. You can download that sample app. Just go clone Xamarin Essentials, and the samples application is part of it. And you can, if you have features that you would like to add, or maybe a bug you want to fix, go fork it and submit a pull request. See if you become part of this ecosystem. And maybe the best thing to do is just go get started. Go get started. Just go get the NuGet package. Do the Android config. If you're using Xamarin Forms, do the Android config. And just start playing with it. Maybe even start moving your applications over to Xamarin Essentials. So the stuff that you've been implementing manually, if there's a Xamarin Essentials equivalent to it, and it's low risk to do this, then at least go try porting it and see if it's better. I found that I had greater performance and higher stability when I stopped using my own implementations of things and moved to something that was possibly more vetted. And then, of course, they talk about Xamarin Essentials almost every episode of the Xamarin podcast. If you haven't, James and Matt do a great job. They talk about so many wonderful things, new features in Xamarin, the pick of the pod, Azure services that are related. Very cool stuff. And I encourage you to listen to that. That's available on pretty much any podcast app. It's really easy to find. And with that, I say thank you. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm here for you. I'll stay on. And my email address, very easy. It's just ari@ari.net. And on Twitter, it's Ari. I was lucky to be able to get Twitter in the very beginning.
Awesome. Thank you, Ari. The other thing is, for everybody, I got most of your emails. The only two for the first 10 people that joined is Mark Hubner and Bob C. They may have left already, but if not, maybe they've emailed me. But feel free to send that email so I can send over that gift card for Grubhub tomorrow.
Awesome, wonderful, and thanks for doing that, Greg. Wonderful stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording. Does anyone have any questions?
Just lots of compliments, lots of thank yous in the chat.
Oh my gosh, thank you very much. Yeah, I had closed the chat. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'm looking at everything now because I couldn't look at it before. Let's see. We do update it all the time. Yep, always a good thing. Yep, Essentials is included in the project. Templates and pre-configured. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for all the thank yous. It's hard to say thanks to all of them. Let's see. I installed Visual Studio 2019 and selected all plugins. Did that install Xamarin Essentials? No. So, Mark, you asked about how you get this. You'll need to use the NuGet package. So the best thing to do, I'll just show you real quick. So I'm just going to share my screen. What you would do in your application is just right-click your solution. I'll just go through a whole new process for you and just show you. So just from scratch. So we'll just go with a new project. We'll do a Xamarin app. It's Xamarin mobile form or mobile app Xamarin Forms, which by default I think it includes it out of the box. So I'm just gonna say cdev okay to delete, so I know I can delete it. So give it a moment and it'll create the mobile app. We'll just go with a blank app, iOS and Android. You could do UWP if you want, but for this demo, I'm not gonna. Shell is very cool. I would love to talk about Shell, but there's not enough time. Of course, that's probably a two-parter. So give it a moment, let everything settle. So you can see right here, it might have already added it. So let me take a look. References. Okay, so this one didn't include it. So good. So here's how you do that. So we'll go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Oh, no, it did. I just didn't wait long enough. But still, same thing. Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Oh, come on. There we go. And you'll go to Browse, okay? I think it was Mark that asked, right? Right, Mark, yes. You'll go to Browse and you'll just search for Xamarin Essentials. It's right there. And what you'll do, if you don't already have it installed, you'll see that right here. These will be blank. So for your mobile apps, okay? So the shared app, you don't have to do it in the shared app if you use a shared app, but if you use the class library, which is the default these days, you'll want to install it in all three, because there's a different version of Xamarin Essentials for iOS, a different version for Android, and then of course the one for just standard .NET, just .NET Standard. And the reason this is important is because you would have your iOS implementations right here. You'd have your Android implementations right here, but that's taken care of for you. So you'll see actually the built-in template in Visual Studio. Has anyone noticed a little issue here? It comes with 1.3.1. So you would probably want to update that to the latest stable version. So just go ahead and update it and hit OK. Accept the license. And you'll see after you install it, it'll even walk you through how you get started. So if you lost the URL for getting started, just go ahead and open this guy right here and just follow the steps. The only place where you really need the extra steps is on Android. iOS and UWP out of the box, you're set. So just heads up there. And they give you nice, links to the documentation, and then of course any release notes.
Mark said thanks.
Hey, you're welcome. Let me see if there were any others in there. Let's see. There was a. Yep, there's an app for that. So there was a question about a. Okay, so the question was, and I'm not sure how to say your name is Bonke, maybe. How do you suggest, or do I suggest a good book to start in Xamarin? I would start with the documentation, and then if you go to Microsoft Learn, that's probably actually. Let me reverse that. I would start with Microsoft Learn. So let me find you this. I'm going to find you the link to this. Yep. Microsoft Learn. Yeah, there it is. Microsoft Learn. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again. Here you go. So if you go to docs.microsoft.com/enus/learn, and this is a great place for learning anything from Microsoft. Okay, let me get back to that. So what you can do, learning paths, you can hit browse all paths. And Xamarin should be one of them. So if you go Xamarin, you'll see there's these are modules, but you want to find the one that's the track. They have a learning path on this sort of thing. I gotta find it. They have a learning path. Browse all paths. Maybe it might be mobile. Learning path. There we go. I knew it was one of them. So look for these learning paths. I'm going to put that link here. Xamarin Forms learning path. And look, so it gets you started. Creating a mobile app with Xamarin Forms. How you do it. Introduction to Xamarin Android, introduction to Xamarin iOS. For any of you that remember Xamarin University, these will seem very familiar. So all the Xamarin University content, as I understand it, has been folded into Microsoft Learn. So this is really a great resource. How to publish your app, this is a fun one. How to consume REST services, storing data with SQLite. I mean, you can monitor this yourself, but this will help you a lot. Any other questions? Let's look. Let's see. GitHub, Durant. Yeah, so when it comes to background location, you might want to do a service. Yeah. So look into that. And also ask yourself why you need to track it. Thanks, James, for pointing that out. Oh, you're welcome, John, although he left the conversation. And just a heads up, if you want to review any of this stuff later, this will all be online. I'll add it to YouTube. I'm curious how large this is going to be. There we go. Oh, cool. James joined. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Love the podcast. Say hi to Matt. You guys are doing such great work. Let's see. Background location. I'm looking to see. I don't see any other questions. Did I miss any? I'm looking. Does anyone know where I can get a haircut? Yeah. That's a good question. I got one right before the day, right before they put the stay-at-home restrictions on here in Indiana. I got my haircut. Then, yeah. So we'll see. I might just go and just shave it. Okay, it looks like that's all the questions. So I'm going to stop recording for now. Feel free to stay on and ask additional questions if you like. But I'm going to stop recording anyway. Doop, doop, doop.